Siadhal, welcome to the Modern People Leader. How you doing?
Thanks so much, Mammy. Yeah, I'm doing great. How you do both doing?
Doing all right. Not as good as Steven. He's in LA right now on vacation. I'm a little bit jealous, but my week's starting pretty well.
My week's good. I've survived my first trip to Disneyland. It was like a full day,
Oh,
8:30 a.m. to midnight, and
Oh
my daughters
wow.
are 13 and 11, so they're
Yeah,
like older, but
yeah.
that's a lot. And so
We did a
survived.
we did a trip to like a child friendly or like child focused kids park in Italy, Lake Garda, a few weeks ago, and my kids are a lot longer younger than yours, and I feel like I'm still recovering. Really, just like it's like the opposite of a holiday.
Yeah, I bet you need a vacation from that
Yeah, yeah,
vacation.
exactly.
vacation from the vacation. Well, let's get into good news stories. So every episode we start with a good news story and we share a personal or work related story from the past week or two. Who wants to kick us off today?
I can
So
go. Since
yeah.
why don't I kick it off? So yeah, on the personal side, sort of like I mentioned already, sort of having a young family. So one daughter who's 2.5, and the other who's 6 months. And the 2.5-year-old hit some pretty good milestones from a potty training perspective in the last week or so, which has been the sort of the focus of our family life. So yeah, been pretty pumped about that. That's been good fun to watch. The strange as that sounds. From a work perspective, similar, like we hit some really good milestones, I'd say, like commercially, but I'd say the best news we received, which was a little, I've always been a bit of a, almost as even just a fan of startups and tech companies as a spectator before I even started Metaview. And one company that we work with, I've always been a sort of a fan of from the outside. And actually the CEO of that company, I've also been a fan of, sort of quite well-known company, well-known CEO. And since they've become a customer, one of the director of talent that we work with there mentioned she brought it up during their quarterly business review that this is one of the main things they're focusing on is improving their interviewing, and Metaview is a big part of that. And apparently the CEO got really jazzed about, A, great that she brought it up. B, the CEO actually got really jazzed about it and wanted to give it a go. So that's like yeah, was a sort of a smiling moment for me for sure.
Those are the best. As a founder, you're like, yes, it's happening.
Yeah.
That feeling is you work so hard to get to those moments. So kudos to you all. I'll go next. My personal good news is pretty straightforward. I've been on vacation for a week. We've been in LA. We've got one more day today in LA. Then we head to Denver on our way back to Texas. So we're just like doing everything we can to avoid the 100 and whatever degree weather in Texas right now. It's miserable. So a little stop in Denver here ahead of us. And so that I'm super excited about that. On the kind of work front, I'm in like the second wave of network meetings. Sile, you probably don't know this, but I'm in the process. I sold my previous startup to a private equity backed company, and now I'm trying to figure out what my next move is. And so the long story short, my ideal path is I'm getting a lot of positive feedback on. So that's encouraging.
Yeah, that's excellent news. All right, so my good news story, briefly mentioned this before we hit record, but we just wrapped up our H2 planning for the Modern People Leader. And one of our big focuses for the second half of the year is figuring out like what's the next Modern People Leader product. Like if you can think of the first product being the podcast, what's product number two? And Stephen having a startup background, me sort of having that same background, we're going to follow the lean startup model. And we wrote out the script for the lean startup interview that we're going to be interviews that we're going to be conducting over the next probably 2 or 3 months. We've narrowed it down to like 3 or 4 problems that we're really excited to tackle that we hear people leaders consistently talking about on the show. And we have a list of people that we're reaching out to for the first wave of interviews that we do. So I am really excited. We have, I think, our first interview on Friday, and we're going into this like super open minded. We don't know if the next NPL product is a paid community. We don't know if it's a tech product. We don't know if it's a widget. Like we're really going into it like as open minded as possible. And I'm stoked. I'm ready for whatever it is that we build next. And yeah, got some good stuff coming.
That's awesome.
It's great news.
All right, Sile. So I think, Stephen, you commonly refer to this as our Brene Brown question, where we ask you to share your story. And I feel like, most founders have quite interesting stories, and everyone has, a slightly different background and, journey to entrepreneurship. So I'm curious, like, what is your story, and how did that lead you to co-founding Metaview?
Yeah, so from a career, sort of early career perspective, was all set to go to law school after my undergrad finished, and was just about to sort of, I guess, go finish up the application process. I'd been accepted into a certain school and just had a bit of a moment of clarity, or at least now I look back on it as a moment of clarity that I'm not sure that's what I want to do. I came from a family of a lot of people in the medical profession in my family, so obviously really great environment to grow up in. But also one of the downsides is there's not a ton of knowledge within the family about the private sector, basically, like what other careers are out there other than doctor, lawyer, accountant, these type of things. So at that point decided, hey, you know what, I'll just take a year to see what's out there and sort of explore the world of industry, but like pretty directionless initially in my career. I'd say like ambitious and somewhat thoughtful about what I want to do, but not without a clear direction. So I ended up via a pretty circuitous route getting into tech, and was lucky enough very early in my career to sort of take over or sort of manage a product within an internet company that was their mobile application. And this was before mobile was actually the focus of every internet company. And sort of, was in this lucky position where I was looking after this product when the iPhone came out, when the App Store launched. And then all of a sudden, this is like a massive thing for the company. And I have all of this institutional knowledge almost in my head about how this platform actually works. So that was a starting point for me. That's what got me sort of essentially just a massive fanboy of tech, even coming from sort of not a technical background initially. Really threw myself into it, worked my way towards, I guess, increasingly senior product leadership roles within a few companies, and landed at Uber, which is where hiring really started to become my I guess secondary passion behind tech, I would say. Main takeaway from Uber. Well, actually not main. There's a ton of takeaway from Uber. I was there at the same time where sort of there was a 2 headlines a week about something salacious going on at Uber. That was the same period I was there. Obviously, I did not feature in any of those headlines or any of those articles, I promise. But one of the things I did take away was that we were just hiring a bunch, and felt like we had a lot of leverage in a lot of the work that we did from a product. When we're building product, shipping product, experimenting with products with our customers, we had a ton of leverage, a ton of sort of instrumentation. Really felt really informed, more informed than I've ever felt as a product manager at any company previously. But when it came to hiring, it felt a lot like how I did at every other company previously. It really felt like a grind, not as high leverage as I really sort of knew and understood it to be. I know how important it is to hire great people, but I can't get away from the fact that while I'm doing this, I feel like it's a really unreliable process. I don't know if like this candidate who I think is great is actually going to get hired, even though I have really strong conviction about it, because it's this consensus driven process. So about that was sort of joined Uber about 7 years ago. About 5 years ago, decided to leave and start Metaview to try and solve that along with the co-founder. Realized there was a lot more to it in order to solve it than I maybe thought sort of at the time. But 5 years in, really focusing now on helping recruiters and hiring teams just be more human during the hiring process. So that means being more present when they're with candidates, being responsible for really getting to know them, which is what recruiters and interviewers want to be responsible for. They don't want to be responsible for the admin and the drudgery and all these things. Being responsible for making accurate and informed judgments about them. That's what our product is really about. So really started off the back of these experiences at Uber, where we were hiring like crazy, and felt like we could do more to help people do a great job.
Love this story. So what would you say is, as you were describing leaving 5 years ago to start Metaview, and how it was a bit more difficult to solve for this problem than you expected, I'm curious, like what would you say has been the biggest, like, unexpected challenge of being a founder for specifically an HR tech company?
So I would say, I think whether it's unexpected or just maybe like the size of the challenge was unexpected, maybe sort of like academically I knew it existed, is just it's obviously such a people-centric role, right? So one of the things you can think, of course, in general, talent, HR broadly, recruiting as well, and talent, it's a horizontal, right? It affects everyone in the company. It's not sort of specific to engineering or sales or G&A or whatever. It's a horizontal. And it's each of those horizontals are also filled with people. So even if you think you're sort of buying a technology product, you might think of yourself as like, oh, we're selling a platform here, but you're just selling to the technology, to the, let's say, the tech department or the sales department or whatever it might be. Recruiting is very different. In our world, we don't want to just be selling to recruiting. We actually want to sell so that everyone is part of this hiring platform. And that just makes it it's a really big lift, frankly, to get everyone on board. And so it's one of the things we've actually adapted about our approach is we really try and take this layered approach to rolling out our product now. But I would say that was one of the big realizations. Like, we had a ton of buy-in as soon as people would see the product, like, yeah, this makes a ton of sense. This is definitely the way it's going to be in the future. Let me have a few discussions internally, speak to my VP of engineering, speak to my VP of sales, realize they've got some other priorities right now in their team, and it just makes things difficult. The product's changed a lot since then, and we don't get so many of those roadblocks, but I'd say that was the sort of big challenge that we didn't know the size of when we first started.
How much of that resonates with you, Stephen?
Oh, so much resonates with me. My answer would have been a little bit different, but that's just like the category is employee listening is very different to kind of the talent acquisition space. But so much does resonate with me. And I guess for me, when you think about your success, there are a lot of people who would be like, oh, well, this is so obvious. Like, what your product does. Like 5 years ago, though, this wasn't really on the radar. And so, like, how does it feel to like have called, 5 years ago, you made a bet, right?
Yeah.
And it's in a hot space already, right? Because HR tech has just been work tech, particularly the last 3 years, has just been going insane. How does it feel to like have chosen a niche in your kind of industry that is just like arguably one of the hottest parts of the industry?
Yeah. Whenever I think about this, I just think it's a mix of luck and judgment, to be honest with you. I think that the sort of one of the reasons we knew that, hey, it might be the right time to start a company that tries to make sense of what's happening in interviews and structure this deluge of unstructured data that we get out of these conversations. Again, as you said, 5 years ago, maybe it was actually a little bit early to do it. But the reason we thought it might be the right time is because clearly more and more conversations at that point were being had within arm's length of like a camera and a microphone. And so you just start to think, okay, there's going to be a world where the step to start to capture this data is getting smaller and smaller. It's becoming like a half step. And then, of course, we had the pandemic, lots of negative consequences of that are obvious. But one of them that sort of a lot of people reflect on and sort of still sort of live within is this push to remote, and how suddenly so many more of our meetings weren't just had within arm's length of a camera and a microphone. They were had literally into a camera and a microphone, and that was their working life. And then, of course, in the last 6 to 9 months, as large language models and this AI revolution has started to take hold, suddenly what we're able to do with that data that we've always captured as part of our platform has just 10x'd. So two things that I didn't predict, right? So there's when I say luck, there's two things I didn't predict. Obviously, I give myself and the team lots of credit for building things that mattered in the meantime, such that we, had customers, we had a growing business. But really now it's sort of it's definitely a new era that, I couldn't have planned for.
And so you've given us a little bit of an explanation of what Metaview does, but like if you had to describe this to an aunt of yours or to a grandparent, like how would you describe what Metaview does? And then could you kind of walk us through how the product has changed over the years? Because I know that y'all made a pretty big pivot here in the last few months. Isn't that right?
We made a lot of improvements, I would say, in the last few months, more than a pivot. But so how would I describe it to family? I mean, to be honest, it's a bit of a tough one. I feel like I've always struggled to describe to family, especially with AI being, who knows, one of the most searched things and one of the most sort of top of mind things. It's actually gotten a lot easier. So funny enough, it's gotten easier as the product has gotten more powerful. It's almost become easier to describe it. I describe it as an AI assistant for hiring teams or for interviewing teams. If they want to go one step deeper than that, we're an AI note taker for hiring that makes it so that you can do hiring hands-free. You can focus on the candidate our AI is going to take notes for you, summarize them for you, structure them for you, such that really your job of your sort of administrative task during and after the interview goes away, because our AI gets it so close to perfect every time that you don't need to worry about that anymore. So that's what we do in a nutshell. In terms of how it's evolved, so I sort of mentioned that we had this experience I was at Uber. My co-founder was on the engineering team at Palantir. So sort of two high growth US tech companies, but quite different approaches to hiring. One of the things that really the founding question that started the company was, how do we make it so that no bad hiring decisions are made again? Okay, we're never going to achieve that. It's never going to be no bad hiring decisions ever again, but that's our big, hairy goal. How close can we get to helping the world achieve that? And again, as hiring managers and interviewers, what we knew, and I guess we over-indexed on, which I see as a positive thing for our sort of perspective on the market, is that what happens in the interviews is really what determines who you hire. Like that's the part of it we saw, and we knew that frankly we were responsible for hiring decisions. So it sort of just made sense that that's the key moment that determines who you hire. The way we started the company was based on that phrase: how do you make it so no bad hiring decisions are made again? Well, impossible for us to achieve that unless people actually have data about what's happening in their interviews, right? I'm a product manager. I cannot build you an amazing product if I don't know how the product's being used right now. Same thing for talent. So we started more with this interview analytics approach, which is the product that suffered from the problem you asked me about earlier, which was, well, to do that, you need to roll it out to everyone in order to get your data. Then you need to wait 3 months to get the data. And then you need to sort of understand the data. And it's really hard to drive urgency when there's quite a lot of friction to get the outcome that you need. The big pivot that's occurred in the last 6 months has been still very much part of what we believe to be important. This sort of aggregate analytics view of the hiring machine, the interviewing machine that sort of constitutes a part of your hiring machine. But now we focus much more on the end user. How can we make recruiters, interviewers, hiring managers, how can we make their life easier when they're doing this, what is supposed to be a really high leverage task? Essentially, how can we make hiring feel like the high leverage activity that it is? And that's made everything much, much easier for us, because actually it turns out for talent team, if you're a talent leader, to roll out a product to the whole company, you sort of need those people to like it. You have a certain amount of authority within the company, obviously, but we're asking you to put a lot of faith in us if we're saying, hey, use your corporate credibility to push this on everyone in the company because you want data. That's a really hard, tough story to tell. But actually, when you delight end users, make their life easier, we're finding that's a great way to get people on board to the product, both sort of like technically, literally onboarded to the product, but also sort of emotionally, like, yeah, this makes a ton of sense. This is why we should be capturing our interviews, because it means that I don't have to do the drudgerous task of writing up my notes.
And how big is the Metaview team?
We are 11 people.
Okay, 11 people. And why should me and Steven be jealous that you get to work there?
There's a bunch of sort of I'm sure sort of folks give similar answers around, like the quality of the people and these sorts of things. Obviously, all true, and like we love our team. We think we've done a great job hiring a really talent dense organization. But honestly, I think the thing that excites us all right now, and hopefully this remains the case for a while, is it's quite rare to be able to be building on the cutting edge. So like everyone is talking about how are we going to apply AI in a pragmatic, impactful way. So to be working on that cutting edge, but also be pushing it against existing customers who have real problems and are giving us real feedback about it. It's not a toy. It's not a sort of experimental thing. It's not a prototype. We're actually putting product in people's hands, on people's screens, that was something that's literally not even imaginable 5 or 6 months ago. And we're getting feedback about it. Like it's really amazing to be part of. So I think that honestly, the sort of the biggest selling point for if folks wanted to join Metaview would be, if you want to learn and play an active role in determining how AI is going to affect how we work, there literally can't be many better places on earth to do that.
In one of my most recent interviews, I mentioned in the good news that I've been having these, I'm a big believer in networking and the power of networking. And every single job I've ever had, whether it was an employee or a founder, I found all of them through my network. And so in these meetings, like I'm obviously, they're very intentional. So one of the questions that I've asked is like, where should I be looking? Like, here's the profile, what I'm looking for. Where should I look for that? And the feedback has been resounding. Like, there are very specific segments of HR tech that you should be looking at, and AI. For the reasons that you were just mentioning, Sal. I think that there's just so much going on. It's so early in the expansion, like this rapid expansion of the industry, that if you're wired that way, and I can see why. I can see the excitement, and I know that feeling of like building something that can really make a difference. And so I want to talk about that here in a sec. But before we do, I want to zoom out a little bit. And so one of the things, so this is a newer style of modern people leader that we're doing, where we're interviewing HR tech CEOs or anyone that is kind of adjacent to the people leader realm. And obviously, as the CEO of Metaview, we have a lot of exciting things we want to talk to you about, but we've been doing for our HR leader, our people leader interviews, something called State of the Union on Talent. And so I want to do a similar segment, but change it slightly and have a State of the Union on AI conversation, and not so much specific to kind of your very specific kind of use case and application, but just more broadly, because it feels like that. And you've been a part of some digital revolutions, right? Having worked at Uber, and what is different about the AI revolution? And where do you think we are in this kind of phase, and what's to come?
Yeah. Well, obviously we're right at the start, right? To sort of answer your last question first, where are we? We're right at the start of this. The level of sort of the resolution of predictions as you go further out gets sort of less and less. So I try and think of things just in broad strokes. When I sort of analyze how we beyond recruiting, just how I've always worked within any organization, I sort of think about AI being able to help us in a few ways. And a sort of a core principle of all three of these things is really just understanding AI to be something that's really good at making predictions. And that could be as simple as how you use ChatGPT, which is it's predicting what the most likely word is next in a string or a sequence or a monologue or a paragraph, whatever it might be. But you can apply that to sort of to basically anything. So when you think about, and the reason that's a useful model to think of is because when you think about your work, often your actions are actually, there's an underlying prediction about what's going to happen off the back of that action, which is why you're taking that action. Anyway, this will make more sense when I sort of describe my way of thinking about it. So really, I see it sort of impacting us in three ways. One is automation. So the sort of the bucket or the bin of tasks that can be automated has now gotten much larger. We thought it was going to be like literally the things that require me just when I click this and I click that. I wish someone could automate that away, because that's like feels like a total waste of time. The bar's much higher now. It's like, in our case, again, don't want to be too specific to us, but pulling out the most important information from a conversation, suddenly you realize that's not actually, that requires intelligence, of course, but artificial intelligence can do it because it's not really so much of it's something that can be learned over time relatively easily. So automation, what are you doing that you feel like you can somewhat do on autopilot? That's probably something that basically an autopilot is going to start to do. So automation is one bucket. The second bucket is detection. So we all have sort of questions, again, irrespective of industry you're in, like, oh, I'd love to know this, or I'd love to know that would help me make this decision about what to do in the future. But it's impossible to know that because I don't have the data. Not only, maybe I do have the data in a database somewhere, or maybe I don't even have the data. It's not being captured at all. It's not even in my purview, the idea that we could be capturing that data. Well, that goes away now as well, because suddenly we have technology that's able to sort of consume vast amounts of unstructured data. And then we can essentially use unstructured queries to ask questions about it. So you've just like jumped the whole sort of need for sort of capturing and then structuring data in order to make it consumable, and then learning like a data querying language in order to extract meaning from it, and then build a visualization so that you can actually influence some, like all of that. I'm not saying that totally goes away, but there's a lot of use cases where a lot of cases where that's no longer needed. And so your mind just has to massively broaden to what are the things that we can actually detect now that I thought were impossible. And again, just to bring it to life, I know most about my industry, obviously. In our case, that could be, well, previously, of course, I could never know if as a company, we were going easy on some candidates in the final stage interview and hard on others. It is impossible unless I'm going to literally sit in all of them, keep a mental tally of how many questions we are or something like that. I'm just not going to do it. No one's going to do it. Suddenly that's very possible, actually, because in fact, it's almost negligible how sort of easy that is to do now at this point. So suddenly you can detect much more information, which means, of course, you should have better decisions off the back of it. And I think the third bucket, which is the one that there's probably the most column inches around and maybe the most fear around, some of it healthy, some of it, sometimes it can be a bit over the top, is recommendation or decision. Like, at what point do we start to say, hey, this AI can actually make recommendations that are essentially as good as a decision, and I accept the recommendation every time. So essentially it's a decision. And there's going to be some parts of our working world that affect, and we'll want that to be the case. And there'll be others where we're a little bit more sort of conservative about whether that's a good idea. And there'll be others where it's just like a blanket no. Like, as humanity, we see that as a human decision. The way that I see that going is that essentially we'll start to think about these AI tools essentially as assistants. And just like when you onboard someone who might be your assistant or maybe a more junior member of the team, initially you give them quite a lot of oversight. So you might delegate a task to them, but you give them quite a lot of oversight before they send that report to that other person in the company. You might look at it, go through it page by page and, redline a few things. Next time they do it, it's a bit better. Next time they do it, it's a bit better. And then eventually you're like, it's a waste of my time to look through this person's work because it's so close to right every time that my time is better spent elsewhere. And that's the same relationship we'll have with AI, essentially. There'll be this initial phase where we should be really focused on, is this actually a good output? I actually see too many cases where people are taking sometimes the output of an AI as, it wrote a job description, so it must be good. Like, no, that's not the right way to think about things. It's your job. You're still accountable for the output, but that does mean at some point you'll sort of make a judgment call of, is my time best spent overseeing the output of this thing, or is it better spent elsewhere? And that's the sort of the gradual, much as it's a revolution now, I think that sort of that decision level that will be much more gradual.
As I'm listening to you, first of all, like, thank you for laying it out the way you did. I think that is a great way of looking at it and understanding it, because a lot of the conversations that I'm having, that we're having even on this show, is like people just trying to understand the implications of AI. And one quick follow-up question: you mentioned we're at the beginning. However, it feels like a fully fleshed out beginning. And like, usually beginnings and revolutions start with like a scrappy start.
Yeah.
But this is like, it's so clean and so functional, and it applies to so many use cases. That's how does something like that happen? Is that just go back to those that were kind of investing in the main tech? Like, how are we at the beginning, although it seems like it's been around for a while?
I don't think that's that uncommon, actually. When we first started to electrify factories, for example, so there's a story. I'm stealing this from a book I read, but sort of I think useful. Folks may have sort of been aware of it. Back in the day, factories were steam powered essentially, and so every sort of machine in the factory had to be directly sort of attached to this central engine within the factory. So your layout of the factory floor was very different. You couldn't have these sort of large, expansive factories. They were all quite small, boxy, because these machines just needed to be close to an engine. And that the central, what was a factory? It was a big building with an engine in the middle of it with machines attached to it. And then electricity came along. And the first sort of instantiation of that was, well, we've got some factories that are already here. Let's replace that steam-powered motor engine, whatever it might be, with an electrical one, but leave the layout the same. Great. We can now sort of run these machines much more efficiently. We can leave them to work overnight because we don't need to watch them. So real significant improvement in the efficiency with which things were produced, were manufactured. But over time, of course, people realize oh, damn, we don't need to have these small factories that are all centered around this one machine. We can actually have this massive, expansive factory with lots of machines that are operating all the time and whatnot. And so then the real revolution was much more gradual, because of course it takes a lot of time to build that infrastructure around, no longer with this assumption you had to build in a certain way. So I think that's a good analogy for what will happen in the way of work. Yes, the initial impact is massive because you're essentially putting a turbocharger on what we're already doing. Makes sense to completely lean into that because it's a good way to be competitive and win and all those things. So I'm not sort of trying to dissuade people to really lean into sort of strapping one of these turbochargers to their back. But in the long run, what we'll realize is the work that we actually do will change in more fundamental ways. And that's the thing that I think is much harder to like predict. And, it's going to be the thing that's going to be really fascinating to observe, essentially.
Totally agree. And so what are some of the ways that the most forward-thinking organizations and companies out there are leveraging the turbocharger that is AI?
Yeah, I think our perspective, and obviously what we're seeing, is that automation is the first and highest, the most immediately valuable way to sort of think about AI. Again, if I take a recruiting lens specifically, we're talking in summer of 2023. Last year, or 9 months or so, has been a pretty tough one for recruiters in general, like lots of layoffs, but still quite a lot of high demands on recruiting team, even with a smaller team, and just a general need, I guess, to do more with less. That's like the overriding sort of theme that we hear from recruiting teams. And there's no way that that's unique to recruiting teams, right? That's just a general business context at the moment. Like, we need to maximize our efficiency. So I see most people focusing on that automation side. Essentially, how can I make it so that we can be just as productive or even more productive than we've ever been? Because busy work is no longer sort of a factor in our day-to-day. And this is what I mean by these things taking a long time. I think we're talking about a reasonable number of years where that remains the sort of where we shake out all those ways where we could actually be automating these things. And I don't think it will be binary, right? Hey, there's this bucket of things that should definitely be automated, and there's this bucket that definitely shouldn't be. I think organizations will take positions, they'll make judgments. We think it's really important to be artisanal with this thing, so we're not automating that away, and that's what makes us unique. Whereas we think, company B thinks, actually, that's not a differentiator for us. We can automate some of that, and it's going to be, 3 times or 10 times as efficient and 90% as high quality. And that's absolutely fine for us. And so you'll get these different competitive dynamics sort of starting to emerge, even within that automation bucket. So when I say automation, of course, the thing that AI is bringing to the table is that automation of these increasingly sophisticated tasks. But the so what of that is actually it's the counter, right? It's what are the things that we're not automating and we're going to do an exceptionally good job of and are going to make us unique that people will spend more time on. So the consequences aren't sort of just boring efficiency gains. I think the consequences are actually more greater creativity and greater human input into the things that organizations care about because of the automation of all the other stuff.
It's funny, even as the modern people leader, we're already making judgments about like what should be automated versus what shouldn't be. So for example, one thing that I've chosen not to automate is editing. Like, there are AI editors out there where you can upload your file and it'll spit out like an edited version, but from my experience, it's not always perfect.
Yeah.
And there are also tools where you can put your entire video file in there and it'll spit out 10 video clips. But what I found is it's like still not perfect, right?
Yeah,
they're not really the moments that I think are going to be the best to feature. So I've
yeah.
chosen to continue doing the manual work and fully edit the episode.
So let me, I guess, I don't want to say tell you, but let me predict for you the way that's going to sort of change over time. You will, and whatever software you're using for that outcome, either you'll adopt a new one or the one you're using currently will work out a way to include it. We'll start to introduce some AI elements into the product. And they might be, okay, this person takes their editing really seriously. So the way it works for them is we just help them with the maybe sort of, once you've identified the bit you want to edit, how can we sort of cut that for you and literally make it so you don't have to draw the line on the sound wave here and that type of thing you won't have to do anymore. Then all of a sudden this assistant will literally learn from you, like, hey, it tends to be when we ask this question, that's pretty regularly one of the things that we like to include in a clip that we upload to LinkedIn. So actually, before Daniel even gets to the editing suite, it's already going to be that, hey, I think this clip might be one you're really interested in. So it's much less upload and see what you get back, much more ephemeral, proactive. I'll be there for you. And if I get things right, great. If I don't, it doesn't matter. I haven't actually impacted or worsened your workflow. So I think that's a sort of a philosophy we have with Metaview as well of it's not an all or nothing thing. You're doing a human activity. AI can still help you. And sort of, in I guess the way I describe it there.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. And I'm looking forward to the day the editing software allows me to do that. But then for like other things, if I need to write a social post and I have, a 300 word quote from a guest that we've had on the show. Before, I would go through and like try to summarize it myself, and it would take me like 30 minutes just to kind of make sense of what they were saying. Now I can just throw that into ChatGPT and it spits out like a perfect summary and bullet
Yeah.
points. And from
Yeah.
there, I can start, constructing a social post.
Yeah.
And right now, that's perfect. Like that's something that I want to automate in the future. Hopefully, I can automate some of the video clip stuff, or at least get the recommendations.
Yeah, but I don't want to sort of noodle on this too much, but do you want to automate the selection of the quotes? What I loved about the example you gave was you understand your audience really well. You think, actually, this body of content that this person is communicating is really what I think my audience wants to know. And no one's better than you. No AI is better than you at knowing what your audience want and the journey you're taking them on. So that's the really valuable, that's the alpha that you have as someone who's obviously working in this business. But yeah, the actual sort of, hey, what's a good way to summarize that, and how do I regurgitate that in a different way? Yeah, that can be. You're happy to have someone help you with that, but I still imagine you'll hold on to that. Hey, this is the thing that I think is part of the journey I want to take my community on.
Totally. Yeah.
So I think there are a lot of different responses to AI. I think there are people that are embracing it, and I feel like it's pretty polarizing in the people that I'm talking to about AI. And because we're all in the last 6 months, I don't think we've had a single show where we haven't spoken about AI.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about it a lot, but I'm finding there's a lot of hesitation. There's a lot of fear. And to those out there that are skeptical or fearful, like how can we get them a little more comfortable with this revolution that's happening?
Yeah. And some of the best conversations I've had about AI have been with people who have like very little technical knowledge about it. And the reason that they've been really good conversations is because they have a sort of a source of confidence around what their job is. Hey, my job is to make sure we hire people quickly. My job is to make sure candidates have a great experience. My job is to make sure our teams are engaged and performing well. So really, if you can, I think the thing that frees you up to be more experimental with AI is really understanding that you're right in thinking AI for AI's sake is a waste of time. You should purely be thinking about, what are we applying this turbocharger to? What is the thing that we're trying to do? Because the business outcomes have not changed. This revolution is not a business outcomes revolution. They're exactly the same. You want to sort of make sure your sort of attrition is as low as possible. You want to make sure you're rewarding your top performers. You want to make sure you're hiring great people. You want to make sure those are things that are happening quickly. That is all completely the same. So I think your source, again, the best conversations that I have with folks, often unrelated to their knowledge of the technology, is usually related to a deep understanding of the business outcome that they're responsible for. And that allows a certain open-mindedness to technology. And is obviously, I think everyone feels like they sort of, it's really hard to keep up with all the news and developments about AI. And frankly, I feel that too. Like I've got a pretty hectic day job and personal life as well. And so to literally stay on top of all of the news is very tough. But where I think a certain amount of intellectual curiosity around these things is obviously valuable. So, completely hiding from it and taking too much pride in being ignorant about how the technology works is not a good thing, but it's also not the most important thing to understand. The most important thing to understand is your domain. And the really, I was going to say, lucky thing that folks in HR and folks in recruitment have is that the core of their work are people. And there's a lot more sort of jobs maybe sort of historically have been considered much more sort of a hard skill, where the core thing was not actually people. And you might actually have a bit more of a problem around the disruption that's going to occur there's going to be disruption for everyone, don't get me wrong, but the sort of the amount of the disruption, if your job at the moment is putting things in boxes on your screen, okay, that's something that software can do really well now. If your job, actually, there might have been loads of peripheral stuff that involves using software, but your core job is actually around people, wow, you're in a really strong position, because that's not going away. So I think there's a bunch that people can do to sort of retain that or sort of build up their confidence without having to sort of feel like they have to become an expert in the actual technology, because you can really champion these human outcomes that these businesses have always cared about. Did that answer the question?
Yeah. No, that's good.
Yeah.
And I have one final question, quick question, because you already told me you can't predict the future, but in your opinion, 10 years from now, is there a world where, a material segment of the Fortune 1000 is not using AI? Like, is that even a possibility in your opinion?
No, that's impossible. And the reason I assume there's no material segment of the Fortune 1000 who aren't using software. Like this is just the next wave of software, right? So it's not going to happen. Funny enough, I saw some articles recently about how the 5 richest people in Europe or something are all designer goods founders, like of Louis Vuitton and these sort of things. So yeah, I'd need to maybe think a bit more about how it affects industries like those. But I'm sure there's I have no idea about how those companies operate. I'm sure they're very data driven and use a lot of technology to do what they do. So I'm sure it will impact them too.
Yeah, definitely. So I want to talk about what AI means for, I guess, like the human aspects of recruiting. So with all of the advancements the last couple of years, really call it like the last year, I feel like with generative AI, it's something that we're talking about on almost every episode with guests now, which wasn't the case a year ago. And I think a lot of people in HR or talent are trying to figure out, how do I augment what I'm already doing with AI? So, like, what should I continue leaving to human judgment? And what is something that AI could potentially take over for me and be my assistant and make me more efficient at what I'm doing? And I know we've already talked about some of the use cases, but like, what else should recruiters be thinking about potentially replacing with AI?
So yeah, I think it's really sort of hard to sort of, I guess, be super specific in this, because I do think that there'll be like a judgment call that folks need to make depending on how they build their business. But if I focus on my sort of experience, tech companies, knowledge work hiring, and the type of things that recruiting and hiring teams get involved in there, I think there's sort of I guess a few buckets where I see things change. So if you think about sort of sourcing, a lot of that right now is, everyone has a profile online, and so the sort of the actual the alpha, the sort of the advantage that one had went from being, well, I've got this network, it's in my black book, it's on my Rolodex, and I can be a great recruiter for you because I know a bunch of people who are probably able to fill this role, or I know where to go, I know the person that knows the person. That sort of like still like maybe in the higher reaches of recruiting remained relatively important, but for the majority of hires became irrelevant because everyone was available online, and you'd have sources scouring the internet. Like, I think there's going to be a back to the future moment on that front, where of course knowing that people exist is no longer enough because software AI does that already. Where recruiters will sort of earn their money or become more valuable to their organization is in the judgment aspects of that. So let's say truly understanding what this HM is looking for, or actually helping the HM understand what they're looking for. This is the type of thing that recruiters for a long time saying they wish they could spend more time on, right? Like really coaching the HM to understand what they're looking for in a candidate, what's not important to them, what's more important to them, and then truly also understanding the market and having that enriched understanding of a manageable number of human beings that might be a good fit. So deeper connections with candidates as opposed to like tons and tons of conversations with lots of candidates that you found online. So I think that's one sort of where there's a partial use of AI, right? Use AI for the thing that was a bit of a grind, scouring for profiles, messaging loads of people, seeing how many come through that you get to have a conversation with, having a sort of ridiculously structured, scripted conversation with them to glean some basic information so then you can then have a meeting with your hiring manager and see which one that they want to speak to. That's not going to be the way things are. That's not how that's not how a high leverage, high impact recruiter is going to operate. They're going to operate where a lot of that stuff that I described happens automatically. What they focus on is really getting to know the human beings and can sort of present this like shorter menu maybe of potential candidates to coach them through understanding which one to bring in, given the fiber of the team and the culture and all these things that are institutional there, or maybe not even written down, maybe not even possible for an like to expose to an AI because it's just in the airwaves between us. So I'd say that's one like sort of bucket, is just that sourcing and just getting candidates in the pipeline. In the actual hiring process, so the tip of the spear, getting people working candidates through to decide whether we're going to work with them. There are some cases where recruiters are, at least part of their role in that is a bit of a bit of cat herding, like cajoling people through the process. Hey, are you free for this? Are you free for that? Can you do this? We've got to make sure we get this candidate in this week. So let's switch this candidate to next week and get this one. All this sort of stuff that's really vital, but also not differentiated. Like anyone could be doing that as long as they had the sort of the intelligence to identify the problem and sort of the attitude to go and solve it. Or you're playing the role of somewhat almost like scribe, right? You're sort of making sure that you get notes out of interviewers, you're attending the debrief, you're writing down everyone, like the key information people said. You're not like running the hiring decision and making sure it gets to a fair and high quality conclusion. And I think that's a transition that will occur too. So less of that cajoling, less of that cat herding through the process. Again, that's the type of thing that an AI assistant will be like perfectly suited to do for you without you taking on any of the sort of the social collateral burden of having to be the one telling people what to do when they don't want to do it. But it frees you up to focus more on that coaching through the process, and maybe even increasingly having a bigger say in the hiring decision as well, rather than just like making sure there is one, actually influencing it and advising, again, interviewers and HMs on maybe what to do differently next time if the candidate rejects the offer, rather than just, okay, cool, on to the next one. Let's get them through the process too. So yeah, those, I think from a sourcing and hiring and interviewing perspective, those are, again, I think in absolute resolution still needs to be worked out, but that's broad base, the transition that I see occurring.
So we recently had on David Landman, who's the head of global talent development at Goldman Sachs, and he was sharing how doctors are actually using AI to sort of help guide really tough conversations that they're having with patients, and how he thinks that the same will start to happen in HR or with managers. So if a manager has to have a really tough conversation with one of their direct reports, they'd be able to use their assistant, and their assistant would sort of like give them a framework for having that conversation, whatever that conversation is about, whether it's a performance related conversation or could be anything. And I'm curious, like for recruiting, I imagine that there are going to be some AI assistants that pop up, and maybe Metaview already does this, where, I don't know, maybe there is a tough conversation that you have to have with a candidate, or I mean, how to negotiate with a candidate. Like, I'm sure there are so many things that recruiters have to do that they could probably get better at through a little bit of coaching.
Yeah.
How do you see that impacting recruiters?
Yeah. I love the example of the doctors, by the way, because I think it highlights quite well how in some ways AI will replace, in some cases it will augment. So I think AI is going to touch a lot of how we work. Even the things we're saying it's not going to replace, it still may well augment, like the example you gave. In the case of going back to doctors, what it's replaced or replacing is like looking at scans, looking at x-rays and identifying whether there's something cancerous in that scan, right? We now know that AI is better at doing that than even a doctor. So like that will just not be a job of a doctor anymore. But what will be the job of a doctor is taking a human being through understanding, what does this mean for them? What treatments do they have to consider? What are the options? Reacting to how they react and then sort of adapting. That will remain. But yeah, no reason why AI can't help with their memory, right? Hey, doc, you've already told this person that when you met them last. You meet 50 patients a week. Each patient, I'm sure, is very important to you, but the fact is you see lots and lots of them, whereas this patient is hanging off your every word and remembers everything you said last time. You've already told them this. So like, let's make sure we don't sort of contradict that or say that again, use this session with them to focus on the same thing again. Something like that. I'm sort of making it up, but you can easily imagine that sort of idea. So within recruiting, I think we sort of talked about a bunch that will be automated away, which is a good thing. And then I totally think that it will be more relationship driven. What that means, if you take that from an expectations perspective of like, what should we expect from an amazing recruiter, therefore, that maybe we don't expect necessarily now, but we love it when we get it, but we don't expect it, is can you actually influence the decision the candidate makes? Can you, as the recruiter, sort of meaningfully impact, if you put a metric on it, our offer acceptance rates? Because you've really got to know that candidate. You've had a series of great conversations with them. You've run a great process with them. You, during that process, have recall of everything that they shared with you. And you know that in 3 of the 7 interviews, they'd mentioned that there was this underlying concern they have. They sort of mentioned it quite passively. And you can use technology to help you identify that problem and then address it when you're giving your sort of as part of your talk track for your offer call. Like that's like next level. Now you're being, wow, we're so glad that you're on the team, and we would not have closed that candidate if you weren't proficient with these tools and able to have that conversation in a really effective manner. So it's still very human. It's still about sort of it's still an increase in, I think, the amount of humanity that sort of exists in these processes, but augmented by technology. So yeah, I basically very much agree with David, was it?
So what are the biggest challenges and objections that you hear from companies, because you're working with companies that are already embracing the AI revolution, that are starting to turbocharge their talent acquisition processes. But I'm guessing there's still others that aren't ready to begin that journey. And so what are the most frequent issues or concerns or problems that companies have that you guys are talking to that are just blocking them from being able to start leveraging these new tools?
One of them is like it's not a sort of a contemporary thing. It's just an ongoing thing, right? And as senior folks within businesses, this is like definitely the right thing to do, which is, there's only so many things you can do in it. There's only so many things you can do this quarter or this half, and you have to obviously weigh up. And much as AI is, I think the hype and the sort of reality are sort of there's quite good connection between the two. I think there really is amazing things you can do. So, you should definitely rethink, if your plan doesn't put anything to do with AI and you never even considered it when you made that plan, then you should probably think about it at least. But maybe your plan's right. You understand the terrain of your business better than I, of course. And so you might be. So some of it is just, hey, this thing is not a priority right now. We've got this other big burning fire that we need to solve. Like, that's always the case. Not everyone should be in market for every AI solution right now, right? That would be crazy. So for sure, there's some sort of very reasonable resistance on that level. From a more sort of AI sort of like anxiety or like AI angst perspective, which I think is a little bit less justified, I think it fundamentally comes down to almost what you were describing earlier, which is your ability to sort of advocate for changing process or bringing in a tool or whatever. Of course, you feel like to an extent, like your level of understanding of that thing needs to be high enough for you to advocate for something. And of course, we all as operators have different levels. Like, maybe I'm super confident. As long as I understand something in broad strokes, I'm okay advocating for it, and like, we'll see how it goes. Whereas other people might be like, hey, I really understand this in complete detail in order before I'm going to suggest that we do this thing. And I think now's not the time for that latter bucket. I think now is the time for experimentation. I think people should take a lot of confidence from the fact that it has to impact the outcomes you've always cared about and you've always owned. But within that, now is the time to be experimenting with other ways of working or other tools, because a revolution is occurring. So yeah, I'd say it's to do with that sort of confidence that you described, and or fear, maybe, to put it even in stronger terms. Yeah, fear to experiment, or maybe put differently, not being open to experimenting and instead thinking we need to find our final, like, all singing, all dancing, bells and whistles, perfect solution. Like, I mean, hopefully Metaview can be one of those things. That's a high bar. We can do a lot for you without having to necessarily sort of reach that high bar.
Yeah, we use a sales tool. The company that acquired our business, they use a sales tool that has like this AI component. And I have to be honest, like, before I saw, and so similar to what you described, that the problem that Metaview solves. This is a problem that with salespeople, right? You're taking a discovery call, you're doing a follow-up, you're doing a touch, you suddenly get them on the phone, and you weren't expecting to get them on the phone, and you're taking notes, you're trying to ask the right question. And after my first interaction with this kind of AI note taker, I was like, oh my God, like, this is so great. Like, I wouldn't have caught like all of these details in my notes. And the fact that I don't have to take the notes, that's the more important fact. Is going back to your comment earlier, like, now I can focus on the more higher value adding activity, which is, okay, based on this great call that I have and the information that I got, what is my next move on the deal? How do I get this deal closed? And I think the deeper we get into this, the more we're going to find that we've spent so much time on these low value tasks
Yeah.
And it's just really going to open things up. And for me, because unfortunately we need to get to rapid fire questions, but for me, I believe that is going to be the game changer, because there's just going to be some organizations that get so far ahead that lean into the turbocharger, that they start, you start to see your competitors like pulling away, and you're like, wait a second, what are they doing now? Because we've always competed well, and it's just going to be a forcing function.
I think that's maybe I don't want to sort of like, I don't think any of us are trying to rely on fear as the motivator of anything, but I think if the fear should exist, the main fear that people should have is of what you're describing, which is you right now, if you are working, say you're competing on this deal with another company that doesn't have anything like this solution, you are at a relative advantage. Like, you're more likely to win that deal than they are. And that of course is happening across, every sort of industry. Like, much as you may have a fear of adopting things, I think a lot of the time the fear of adopting and then it going wrong has a pretty low floor. Like, you're not going to do that much. It's not going to be that bad. Whereas actually the fear you should have of not adopting these things and what might happen, the opportunity cost is boundless.
Huge.
Like, who knows? You could,
Well,
so,
go ahead,
real
Daniel.
quick, Steven, do you have time for one more question?
I do.
Okay,
but we're gonna have to go through rapid fire.
Yeah.
I'm just like, I don't want to end this one, so I'm happy to stretch it out.
So one last question for you, Siadhal. So when you think about some of your, I guess, star customers, is there one that comes to mind where you've seen like a pretty drastic change in how they run like their entire maybe talent function, or maybe just the interview process itself? Like, what's one story that comes to mind?
So I would like very confidently say, like, no, I would not say there's been a massive change in how it sort of relates to this turbocharger thing. It is not, we haven't gone through that foundational restructuring of how hiring happens. I think that will happen. I actually think the idea of having really structured hiring processes that are not considering the context of the candidate so much will go away, because that's one of the things that this Copilot will allow us to do. We'll stop running hiring processes that match what the ATS, someone designing the ATS, and we'll start running hiring processes that understand this candidate's context and what we need to do to either win them or disqualify them or whatever it might be. So I don't think those foundational things have happened. I'm really excited about being part of making that happen. The big impact that we have is on individuals' productivity. So we regularly run surveys as part of our products. How much time do you think Metaview saves you in sort of writing up your notes? Typical range is 5 to 10 hours per week, which is massive for recruiters, massive. People who are interviewing a lot, basically. We actually had one who said it was 20 hours per week. I was like, wow, you were really spending a lot of time. And this person's situation was that a technical recruiter working with a really high-performing technical team really wanted to give and put their best foot forward when they provided notes on candidates for the hiring manager to review, who happened to be very diligent at going through notes before they spoke to the candidate. So the context, she was right to spend that time on the notes, but it's just an incredible amount of time. And so those sort of stories are the ones that we hear again and again. Just the sheer amount of time that you get back to spend time on other, again, differentiated things is what we repeatedly hear again and again.
Love it. Well, we're at that spot where we've got to turn the corner and bring the conversation to an end, Siadhal. It's been a lot of fun, but we're not quite done yet. So now we've got a couple of rituals on the traditions on the Modern People Leader. The next one is rapid fire questions. So same set of questions that we ask all of our guests. So first question, how do you define a modern people leader? What are the traits and characteristics?
Yeah, so I would say the consistent thread that I've seen among great people leaders that I've worked with is really understanding that there is a need to move forward and to change process over time, while maintaining that firm grasp on the things that don't change. So much as you should be open to change, you should have a set of things that don't change. And I talked about my perspective on this earlier, which is essentially the business outcomes. They don't change. Really firmly grasping that is what, while also being open to experimentation, is what I see as like the two cornerstones of great innovation, great experimentation, and therefore like the modern people leader.
Love it. Love it. If you could go back in time and talk to a 22-year-old you, what career advice would you give yourself and why?
Think less about strategy and more about execution. So I sort of gave a bit of a story about my early career. I essentially spent a bit too much time in strategy early in my career. and then a sort of a few years into it, moved over to delivery. In my case, product delivery, product management, and it was great. I should have done it earlier. Getting things done, making things happen is it's really great to make sure you get as much of that under your belt as possible, and then worry about the strategy side of things when you actually have the credibility to point out.
Plus one to that strategy. It just sounds so sexy though. It sounds so cool, right? That's the bit that you should be doing. But my experience has been similar. Last question. Is there anything you believe to be true about the world of work, but don't yet have the data to support?
There's been a bunch of studies into the cost of a bad hire, and I think they all, even the most sort of aggressive ones, wildly undervalue the cost of a bad hire. They always come in somewhere around like 30 to 50% of the hire's salary. It's like, no way. You've got to at least take their full salary to start with. You've got to take into account the negative impact on the team. Like if you have one high performer who leaves the team because they're like, well, the talent density in this team is no longer high enough, I want to go somewhere else. You have to bake that into, and that's like really catastrophic. Then you have to take into account the fact that you'll probably move them on at some point in the next 12 to 18 months, so that you've got to hire for that role again. And then you have to take into account not having hit your objective, or being more likely to not having hit your objective, which we hope was a big commercial objective. So I basically think the sort of the downside to making a bad hire is much larger than people like to admit to themselves. And same thing for if you miss a great hire, sort of on the other side too. So yeah, that's it's hard to get the data, but that's how we run our business.
So we've gotten a lot of our guests from this question I'm about to ask. So who should we bring on to the show next? Is there anybody that you see out there that you're like, ooh, I would love to hear more from that person?
Yeah. One is a good friend of mine, good friend of the company, Rich Cho. He's led recruiting teams at some of the sort of the most talked about rocket ships, Facebook when it was called Facebook, Robinhood, Chan Zuckerberg Initiative. So a bunch of amazing companies. He has really, really great thoughts about, and I think when you speak to this strategy versus execution side, of course, he now talks a lot about the strategy side of things, but it's layered in actually executing this at some of the like most storied companies of like the last 15 years. So he's a great person. He has great war stories as well. So would recommend him. And then the other one is, which might be a bit of a stretch, maybe not, but maybe someone else in his company. The company Automatic have a really sort of great and differentiated view of how they do hiring specifically. So Matt Mullenweg is their CEO. He'd be a great person to get on, or someone sort of senior in the talent leadership team there, because yeah, they have very different ways of going about hiring. Lots of they have this long trial that they have people do, this work trial that you have to sort of make yourself available for sort of weeks as part of the interview process. So yeah, very different approach, and it's worked for them.
We'll have to reach out to both of them. All right. So final tradition of the Modern People Leader, which is one word or phrase close. So we all respond with a word or phrase from the show that we want to end with. And I can go first just because I cheated and I already have something written down, but I'm going to say turbocharge.
I like that one. Yeah, I mean, it's obviously opportunity as opposed to a threat. AI is an opportunity, not a threat. That's I think the thing that people really need to wrap their heads around. And much of sometimes it is scary to be at the foot of an opportunity, just as it's scary to be at the foot of a threat, but it's definitely the right psyche to have.
Love that. And mine kind of dovetails well with that. I'm going to go with higher value. Focus on the higher value activities, because that's the most exciting part of the world. The part of the role that AI could play in the future is that all of us just get to do less of the crappy things we hate doing and more of the things that we want to be doing that we'll learn from. So. Well, Sal, this is an amazing conversation. We went long. We tried to speed it up, but it just didn't want to happen. It was too good of a conversation. So thank you so much for joining us today. It was an absolute blast.
Thanks so much for having me on, folks. Really enjoyed the conversation.
Likewise. Talk to you later.
Bye, guys.
Bye.